Bible lessons from Joseph Street. America is the richest nation. Lesson 4. Have you ever wondered why America is the richest nation in the world and has the most powerful military? Do these two things have any correlation with America's role in biblical prophecy? All of the Bible specifically states that God removes kings and sets up kings. Daniel 2 verse 21 ESV. Scripture also offers deeper insights. The Bible states in Ephesians 6 verse 12 that mankind wrestles not against flesh and blood but against spiritual entities called principalities, powers and rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. This situation originates in Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, which describes a war breaking out in heaven when Lucifer, the anointed cherub of worship, led a rebellion against God and his ordinances. Lucifer, whose name means light-bearer, did not want to worship God but instead to be like God. Through that rebellion, Lucifer and 1/3 of the angelic host were cast out of heaven and sent to earth. Lucifer's name was also changed to Satan, meaning adversary. In Genesis 1, as if to humiliate Lucifer and let him know that with God he was nothing, God scooped his hand into the earth, formed man into his own image, and breathed life into man, the breath of life. From that point on, men became a living soul in the new worship leader on earth. But Satan, the adversary of man, soon convinced Adam and Eve to rebel against God's ordinances, and so the battle began. Mankind would forever be conflicted about whether to walk in God's ways and ordinances or to rebel and fight against them. It was not until God sent his only begotten Son Jesus Christ, who overcame Satan's temptations, died on the cross and rose from the dead, that mankind was given a way back to God through merely asking Jesus for forgiveness. 50 days after his resurrection, on the day of Pentecost, the Spirit of Jesus himself was released upon his believers, who were now equipped to overcome the lies of Satan. The Spirit of Jesus literally entered the believers and began breathing out of them. As in spirit breathed through the lips of clay, they spoke in over 15 languages about the wonders of God. And since that day, the Greater One, the Lord himself, has empowered believers. Government is God's idea. Some might think that America's rise to power is just a coincidence, but I am convinced that America's present role in Bible prophecy is no coincidence. Did you know that government is a concept mandated by God? In fact, it is one of the ways we can read the prophetic time clock as it relates to the Bible prophecy. Daniel 2:12 states that God changes times and seasons, he deposes kings and raises kings. Romans 13 reads, "Let every soul the subject into the higher powers. For there is no power but of God." 1. The powers that be are ordained of God. 2. Whoever resists the power, resists ordinances of God. 3. For rulers are not a terror to good works but to evil. 4. For he is a minister of God to thee for good. But if you do that which is evil, be afraid, for he better not the sword in vain. 5. For he is a minister God, revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Although some of the nations they have risen and fallen throughout history can be seen as either good or evil, most of these nations have been a combination of both. No nation in history has established a government that fully reflects the ordinances of God's spiritual kingdom. However, when a nation does embrace the ordinances of God, it involves his benefits to help that nation fight evil. The founding fathers of the United States of America were second only to Israel in deliberately and enthusiastically embracing God's ordinances within their nation's constitution. America's prosperity has been second to none in the history of mankind. That prosperity has in turn enabled her to please our rule over nations whose fascist governments have oppressed their people. If not for the involvement of the United States in World War II, the nations of Europe would have fallen to one of the most terrible dictators in the history of mankind, Adolf Hitler. Fascist dictators like Stalin, Mao and Hitler have brutally murdered over 1,000,000 people throughout history in attempts to replace the ordinances of God with secular humanist governments. The seventh kingdom to rule before the beast is released on earth with his new world order is said in scripture to sit upon the beast to hold him down until his appointed time comes into play. The tremendous prosperity the USA currently enjoys has equipped her with the military power to do exactly that. She literally stands in the gap between good and evil support and other nations around the world who want liberty and freedom from fascist regime. America has played an incredible role in her short 240-plus years of existence. The prophetic time sequence in which we now live, the prosperity America has enjoyed, and her influence around the world all play a part in fulfilling a description of the seventh kingdom mentioned in Revelation 17 verse 9. According to Scripture, the wealth one received from being in covenant with God is not just for personal enjoyment. This world is to be used to establish his covenant. Deuteronomy 8 verse 18. It also allows that nation to receive and deploy God's benefits, for example his guidance and his protection, and fulfill the task of Romans 13 in being a godly government. Perhaps the greatest advantage of America's wisdom has been the tremendous technical advances in inventions she has provided to the world, that would bless her and other nations and also judge her. Here are a few. The airplane, the assembly line, liquid fuel rockets, digital computers, atomic bomb, bank-issued charge cards, integrated circuitry, compactors, first man on the moon, personal computers, cell phones, microwave ovens, the space shuttle, internet, stealth bomber, Wi-Fi, drones, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and smartphone, and to many more to the post. According to statistics from the 2019 Union of Concerned Scientists satellite databases, the US has over 901 satellites in orbit, traveling as high as 22,000 miles above the Earth. This number is double the amount of the next 10 closest nations. China has only 299 and Russia has even fewer, 153. Global satellite technology delivers real-time audio and video, live stream from anywhere in the world. With the help of digital telescope technology, the US military can identify and monitor objects as small as a milk carton from thousands of miles above the Earth. Isaiah 47 verse 10 English Standard Version reveals to us, however, that her prosperity will come with a price. Your wisdom and your knowledge lead you astray, and you said in your heart, I am, and there is no one beside me. At this point we see a turning point for the seventh providential nation known as Mystery Babylon the Great. The first 15 verses of the Mosaic Covenant and Deuteronomy 28 lists the blessings of those who keep covenant with God. If you want, you can read them over again. For every verse promising blessings if you will be his voice, there are 3 verses warning you of what will happen if you break the covenant with God. What are you, be his word or disobey his word? In other words, there are guaranteed consequences. Earlier I talked about Lucifer, that he was once anointed to carry out God's purposes, but he lifted himself up in pride and decided he did not need God. In fact, he thought he was a god unto himself. According to the Apostle Paul, at that point the mystery of iniquity, sin, was burst within this archangel, and he lost favor with God. According to the Bible, Mystery Babylon the Great falls into the same iniquity because Lucifer fell. In fact, the same spirit of Phil was Lucifer began to manifest their presence through the inhabitants of Babylon. As you may recall, the Bible warns us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, spiritual wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6 verse 12. The word fallen here is a Greek word biptos, which means to fall from one level to another level. These verses specifically state that Babylon falls from one level, that a spiritual relationship with God in his favor, to another level, or she is literally invaded and controlled by evil spirits. We can see this in a recent rioting in looting and lawlessness in our country. Of course not everyone in Babylon falls into that trap. It appears that there is a major battle over the souls of the nation, which John explains, and Revelation 18:4-5 in an English Standard Version it says, "Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, and partake not in her sins. For her sins are high as heaven. From riches to her power and her pride, Babylon the Great sets up for spiritual fall." However, I'm going to add 5 more descriptions of her greatness. 12. Revelation 17 verse 18, she has the greatest military force in the world. 13. Revelation 17 verse 3, she uses her military to police or rule over the 7 mountains of the earth. 14. Isaiah 47 verse 10, she has wisdom and knowledge above other nations. 15. Isaiah 47 verse 10, she is proud, haughty, and says in her heart, I am, and no one else beside me. 16. Isaiah 47 verse 7, Revelation 18 verse 7, she says, I said a queen and shall see no sorrow. Would like comments. If I am wrong I will take correction. Have blessed and safe day, brothers and sisters.